Maybe I have questioned what is in front of my eyes my whole life. Not so ideal for my parents and those attempting to direct me into a reasonable, content existence, but what can I say? I have just the right amount of strengths and self-management skills to sneak under the radar, and just enough campaigner and rebel to cause a ruckus. What I have never questioned is what I see without my eyes, a deeper understanding of the wisdom and flow of life that is happening beyond the rat race, a depth without borders, a depth outside of the box. I am here in these words projecting out of your speakers to shine a light on a different idea, to spread seeds of possibility, to offer balance and disruption, to adjust the camera towards the kinks and shadows of ourselves, and to appreciate every nook and crevice of our existence. I am offering this podcast as a collaborative experiment with life, a journey of freedom making and change shaking, a new way that starts within you. Welcome back, everyone. I have been chomping at the bit to come and share a bit of what I've been working on with you, and so I'm recording it with waves in the background and all. I am launching into this episode with some nervousness and vulnerability, as it was prompted by a period of dark nights I recently went through. I think, or maybe feel, that if we talk about these somewhat heavier, less feel-good parts of our lives, the stuff in the shadows, we shine a light on them and therefore normalize that which is quite frankly normal in our lives. And through that connection, relatability, and courage, we lighten the load and put down the burdens we carry from the stuff that we think are only our deep, dark weights. Dark night of the soul does not refer to the difficulties of life in general, but through many different traditions and lineages are described more often as a spiritual crisis. Eckhart Tolle once said that the term goes back a long time, and one could come to know it as a collapse of a perceived meaning in life. I have been through my own share of these collapses, and more recently one around my insatiable survival skill of othering. I have shared before about my challenge with humanity, and that is often companioned by a mechanism of something like, well, if everyone would just get their shit together and start taking care of themselves, or various other applications, all to the effect of keeping myself safe from self-destructive forces and people and beliefs. Follow me for a moment, because if I can make someone wrong somewhere in my head, then what they do that potentially could hurt me is actually kept at somewhat of a distance from my heart. And then I can accept that it's not me that's the problem and remain quote-unquote safe. Might sound like a bit of a cluster to wrap your head around, but I have come to learn and observe that this is the kind of thing that is going on in everyone's lives and actions. And it's amazing that we cannot see these skills and mechanisms through the fog of habit and belief until we do. So there I was, face to face with the collapse of my mechanism. If you have not been in that before, well then lucky you, as I could describe it to be one of the most difficult feelings in the world, and yet I can't really describe it at all. Maybe a mix of heavy, meaningless, and heartbroken for certain. I thought this was a good opportunity to have a conversation with my friend and spiritual comrade, Tootly, as she has such a relevant experience in this idea of collapse and transformation as of late. Tootly's life looks completely different today than it did last year or even only months ago. She went from a workaholic to currently not working at all, from living for others to making herself a priority, among many other things. Here is a piece of our conversation. Oh, yeah. No, you're just talking to me, right?
That's the better way, yes.
Well, thank you for being willing to share your story with me. I'm attempting to describe what it can be like to go through a major change, a major transition in this podcast episode. And so I thought, what better person to, give an example of that? Not that I know everything about your story, but I do know that it has been a huge transition, a 180 in life, if you will.
Yes.
So, yeah, so if you could share with me where you found yourself once upon a time, what transpired in your life, and the way it was before.
Well, I found myself in a very unhealthy marriage with two kids. I was a workaholic. I took care of the kids and the family, and I worked and I walked a bit, and that was about it. And my marriage suddenly, unexpectedly, traumatically ended. And it was so sudden and unexpected. And because I had been so unconscious to my life and what was going on around me, it just cracked me wide open, just blew through the walls and the armor. And I found myself kind of in the middle of a hurricane, trying to navigate the new reality. And so that occupied me for quite a while. But during that process and taking care of myself, I was receiving a lot of counseling. I started reading some different books, started going to yoga, and those things really saved my life. I started to become, I guess, living more in the present moment, becoming more conscious, getting into my body instead of just living in my head all the time, and just becoming aware of all the other elements of life that I'd been completely unaware of.
How do you think that it transpired that you were a workaholic and in an unhealthy marriage? And like, how does it feel to find that?
I think the way that it worked for me was that I just lived in my head all of my life. From a kid, I went to school and more school and more school, and I didn't know it was important to feel my feelings, and they were really uncomfortable. So I would avoid that. I guess one thing, I never really got any outside help. That would have helped me a lot had I realized the importance of that, or had I started any other significant, yoga or meditation or any of these things that can teach us about what's actually going on right now. So it took a big event, I would have think I would have kept plugging along in that life. I don't know for how long, but I was pretty committed to it. So it took a big event, and at the time I looked at it a certain way. Now I sort of have quite a bit of gratitude for it, although there's elements of it I wouldn't wish to happen because it was quite significant and affected all aspects of my life. I just had nowhere to hide. It was just like whew, raw. So I wouldn't wish a huge event like that on anyone, but it is extremely effective.
Personally, what were your biggest challenges with that much change?
Keeping up to it and taking care of myself through it, being gentle with myself, and trying to being really turned on to seeking more change and more transformation and more help, and yet still functioning in the day-to-day life, because there was a desire to just drop everything and go to India. But having kids and that, I couldn't do that. I didn't want to. Most of me didn't want to, but there was a part that did.
Mhm.
And then just figuring out who I was, I felt like, first of all, I didn't know myself, and then when you change quickly, it's like now you don't know the real you or the new you either.
Mhm.
And so there's a lot of uncertainty. I guess uncertainty is a big challenge.
Mhm.
I found a plaque and I put it on my wall in my bedroom and I read it every day. And it just says, and she knew that the answers would come with time and love. And every day embed that in myself because I didn't know what was going to happen most days.
Mm-hmm.
So I just tried to trust, and that's where I built a lot of trust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems that it can be like overwhelming and you can get lost in it, for a section of time, any one person. You describe it very gracefully, but in a sense, you've described a great upheaval, right? Uncertainty, not knowing oneself, a completely different way of life. And a lot of people would choose to, stay the course that they've been on, right? Even if things have crumbled, it's like we might often grab to the closest, the relatable way of life and do it over again, right? Why make the shift?
I guess a few reasons. One is when the suffering is so great, you just are looking for relief. And I think what it taught me was that the way I had been living was so off. It was just so blind and numb that there was no way I couldn't face that reality, that that was the truth. It's like, I never want something like this to happen again. I don't want to go through something like this again. So I am going to learn what I'm supposed to learn from this. Like, I was highly motivated to change and learn because it was so painful and there was so much suffering, and not just for me. Watching kids in my and others in my life suffer is also very, very difficult. So that's a couple of reasons. And then I was fortunate to have had a relationship with a counselor for a few years who has a spiritual understanding and gave me a lot of guidance that way as I became ready for it. And then some of the books I read, I just, after about 6 months after this happened, I picked up The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. And yeah, that book gave me some sort of awakening to the fact that I wasn't just my thoughts and what was going on in my head, that there was something else. I just got an inkling of it at the time. And so then I became also highly motivated to figure out what that was, because that felt a lot more peaceful than what was going on in my head all the time.
A wise woman that I know I spoke to today, and she was talking about that very book, actually. Yeah, along with that lesson of doing it differently, I would say. What piece of wisdom would you want to share with the world on this topic?
The journey from the head to the heart, from going from living in my head to living in my heart is difficult, but that there's huge rewards. And to just keep going, there's lots of ups and downs. To ask for help from those around you, try to find a spiritual community, any kind of community of like-minded or at least open-minded people. That the addictions that we use to numb ourselves and try and get some satisfaction from life really don't work long term, but that there is a way to find long-term meaning, a meaningful life, and a lot of contentment. It's definitely difficult at times, but it's just so much better.
How does this lead, or how has it led you to your own sense of freedom? And what does freedom mean to you?
Freedom means getting to know your authentic self and feeling free to express it. I guess the way that what this has taught me is that the costs of not listening to the little voice inside are great, and that the rewards to listening to it and to cultivating it and to meditating to quiet the monkey mind so that you can hear the other little voice inside is so important. And I think I'm just really at the start of expressing myself authentically. So we shall see, but it feels way better. It's more relaxing. I don't care that much what people think. And I don't care that much about living up to expectations.
And you get to be you. Follow your heart. At the beginning of a journey of freedom. And it is a journey, isn't it?
Yes, it sure is. Many layers to go through.
What does the future look like for you?
Yeah, I guess I would say that when, you're taught and you learn some practices that help you so much, you want to eventually share them with others. So part of my plan is definitely to learn to share meditation and yoga with others in hopes that that will be of help. That's certainly only kind of one path, one journey, but that's what's worked for me. And just to live in such a way that my priorities are clear to me and to others because they certainly never used to be. Above all, we do have to take care of ourselves first and then we can take care of others. So I do put self care at the top of my list. And that means morning practice every morning involving tea and reading and yoga and meditation. And it can be short or it can be long, but yeah, it has to happen almost every morning so that then I have the resiliency to deal with whatever the day may bring.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, connecting with nature is a huge part of my life as well. And so it's just finding that thing that takes you out of your head and into your heart and soul and nourishing it, putting a priority on that. That's really so important and is going to be really rewarding to do that.
Mm-hmm. I hear you, sister. I hope that conversation sheds a little light on the journey of dark nights and their ability to bring us such great gifts on the other side of the challenge. The really interesting thing is that since coming back to work post-pandemic lockdown, it takes me some weeks to work on each episode, and by doing so, I actually go through a bit of a life process between when I first start recording my tidbits and when I wrap it up. So since the beginning of this episode, I had my own great gifts revealed to me through my dark nights. And through it, I made the commitment to abstain from othering. It is as if othering is my alcohol. And I had a great few weeks of staying on top of that wagon and changing my experience. And lo and behold, as stress amped up in my world, so did my tendency to see myself as separate from everyone else. Damn it! No shame, though. I am already taking an inventory and starting again. That's the thing about learning. It's rarely a moment of clarity followed by a changed person forever. We can read the great works of this world and join in some workshops that help us uncover our triggers and find genuine insights that help us know more of ourselves. And all of that brings more wisdom and understanding to our lives for sure. But the real change is made by doing the work consistently with others. The rubber meets the road in our relationships, and it sounds like we will be on this road until we are not. So until we emerge again, peace and be well, my friends.